Good news. We get 2 flashbacks this week. Bad news. I got Domi reversied. That or my Ancient Giant Blood Awakened. Take your pick. I don't know. Chapter 1152, titled An Awful Day. And given the fact of what we are seeing in the chapter, I'd say definitely qualifies as a couple of awful days. Currently, the present day on Elbath is definitely an awful day for the majority of the people there, I would say. And in the past, for the main flashback we see, not a good day either. So we'll get that. But starting off, so we start off with the Yamato cover page story. And Yamato, Ulti, and page 1 are, of course, in Hakumai region. That's where they were last chapter, with Yamato winning the sumo contest. Now they are speaking to Kawamatsu and giving him the straw hat, Amagasa hat that Tama made. So we get to see that. So that part's been done. Ulti is just kind of talking to Kawamatsu, which we never really saw Ulti and Kawamatsu interact. We didn't know about Ulti until we got to Onigashima and we were introduced to the rest of the Tobi Roppo. And to a degree, Ulti didn't really interact with any of the scabbards, I don't think, besides Shinobu a little bit. But even then, not that much. And I honestly don't remember. I don't think Ulti interacted with Kawamatsu at all, and page 1 didn't really interact with him either. So this is kind of the first time they're getting that. Ulti, looks like she's trying to talk to him, and page 1 is just kind of like, Ulti, maybe don't talk to the Kappa guy. At the moment, Hakumai looks like it's in pretty good condition. We don't see anybody missing. There's no one complaining about that. There's not a new mystery popping up to solve, so we'll see what happens there. The thing that I find funny is that, Denjiro was doing fine in Kibi, going fine there. Got to Curry, and Inarashi, who essentially, out of all of the scabbards, should have the most experience. Him and Nekomamushi should have the most experience in regards to, political matters and dealing with governing people in different areas and stuff like that, because they were the dukes of Zo, and now Carrot is the Duchess of Zo. But it's like, Inarashi was like, yeah, there's people going missing out here in Curry. Are you going to go and look for them? And then, then we got to Udon, and Raizo was not doing a good job because people kept going missing there too. Now we're in Hakumai. Hopefully things are going good here. Into the chapter itself, we pick up right where we left off with the last one. So we got the rest of the new giant warrior pirates trying to hurry their way to the lift. Which we actually see in the next panel. They're just like, hurry, let's, hurry to the lift, and they're like, Gerd, we'll leave this sack of filth with you in your care. So that's referring to Loki. And she's like, got it. And Gabon is also there because he needs to be tended to as well. We'll get to him in a second. But I like how the editor's note is normal hockey emits from the realm of the sun. So this is essentially going on at the same time that, Dorian, Bragi, and such are all getting Domi reversied up in the sun realm. So we cut to see what the lift looks like, and the lift essentially looks like 2 boats curved on top of each other with chains in the middle that are designed to loop them up, I'm assuming. And we see Rode, Stanton, and Goldberg are all getting everything ready here. It's be careful and everything. And then Rode is just like, I shall dedicate all of my might to this, Gerd Tasso. I'm like, please stop. They're like, come on, Harudine, we gotta get going. Let's get going and everything, because they know that they gotta get up to the Sun Realm so they can start trying to save everybody. We see Chopper, and he is currently trying to keep caring for Gabon, and he's like, I'd better stay too, Luffy. Yasan's wounds are too severe. We can't move him yet. And Luffy's like, got it, I'll leave it to you. So Luffy's like, he's like, Chopper is the best one to leave here in this situation. Gabon needs to be taken care of. And if anything, he's got Gerd there too. But Gerd is probably not used to being able to deal with like human-sized patients, and Chopper is much better at that. So that makes sense. And Gabon starts talking. I like how essentially I'm just referring to him by his last. Was like I kept referring to him as Scopper, and now it's Gabon. I don't know which one I prefer better. But which one I like better. But he's like, hey, Straw Hat Luffy, be mindful of the way you use Conqueror's Haki. Those guys are by no means immortal. And Luffy's like, okay, I got it. Thanks. You can count on me. I'll save Colin and his friends no matter what. So, I mean, like, Luffy, of course, would do that anyway, but he's just like, Scopper's, like, trying to give him a hint as best he can about, like, use your Conqueror's Haki on them. That's, like, their weak point. Kind of confirms there, I guess, that, like, maybe Scopper has Conqueror's Haki because he was able to cause that much damage to Summers. Yes, Summers healed. We saw that in, the previous chapter and such, that he was, healing up. But it still took longer than any of the damage that had been done to him already, or any of the damage caused to Gunko. So we cut over to where Loki is sitting and talking with Hyrule. And again, we're getting like these size comparisons between, how big Loki is, how big Hyrule is, and then how big, Gerd is. Gerd's about the same height as Hyrule. And then we have Zoro, Luffy, and Sanji on the ground. And then, Loki's bed compared to, like, Scopper's bed that he's on right now. So he's not lying on the cold, hard, snow-ridden ground, snow-covered ground. And Loki's like, Gabon, that just made it click for me. I wasn't able to put it into words before my own power. So I'm assuming this is supposed to be like Scopper was giving them more of an information as to what was going on up top with like all the giants are being like changed into like devils and this type of stuff, and I don't know what's going on. But the thing is that happened kind of after Scopper fell down. So after Scopper got skewered by Im Gunko. So but he's like feeling this power anyway. And he's like, I'm the only one who's left who faced these knights before. I know I can beat them. So this is referring to the God's Knight. So it's like Loki, this is confirming that Loki has at least dealt with the God's Knights before. Given what we're going to see in the flashbacks, you can kind of figure out when that was. That'll have, dealt with, tying into the flashbacks. It's just like, free me and take me with you, Hyrule. And Hyrule's like, you fighting for Elbath? Like I'd ever think you take you with us. And Scopper is looking over at Zoro and Sanji. Well, specifically Zoro. And he's like, there's another in your group who uses Conqueror's Haki. And both of them are like, And Sanji's like, just pops right over to Gabon and he's like, is it me? Is it me? I knew it. With how things were going, Mosshead and Jinbei were about to usurp me. I'm like, I'm sorry, Sanji. As much as some people like to argue the Zoro versus Sanji debate, strength-wise, I kind of say Zoro's probably stronger than you. Jinbei might be as well. Nothing against you, Sanji. I do still like you, but strength-wise, I think they're ahead of you. But I like how Sanji's like, it's me, isn't it? And they're like looking back at Zoro, which is just funny. One of the original translations I saw for this summary was like, my stocks are up. I'm like, that's not I don't know. They might have the stock market in One Piece. I would assume they would have some form of a stock market in One Piece. They have the World Economic Journal or whatever that Morgan's has. There's that. And then Gabon is just like straight up ignoring Sanji and like looking at Zoro, and he's like, you there, swordsman. Your body seems to be growing accustomed to it, Zoro. Huh? What? I have Conqueror's Haki? Zoro is very surprised. And Luffy just gives off this, like, what? You didn't know? It's been oozing off you. I like how it's just like that kind of comparison there. Because like when Luffy was first learning how to use his Haki, he had Rayleigh there. He kind of started to awaken it just prior to Sabaody when they dealt with Duval and stuff. Because he kind of activated it a little bit against Duval's bison pet thing that I don't remember its name, kind of activated there. And then we saw more of it activating on Amazon Lily, and then through the course of, I think a little bit in Impel Down, but mostly at Marineford, because there's multiple times where we see his, like, Conqueror's Haki activate, or his Observation Haki is kind of kicking in when he, like, notices what Mihawk's going to do. He, that's why he uses, Gumma Gumma no scapegoat and grabs Buggy, and Buggy's the one who gets cut instead of him. So there's that. And so that's, like, where Luffy's, like, learning about his Haki, but he doesn't know that that's what that is yet. And then it finally gets explained to him when, when he's got Rayleigh there, when they're training on Ruskina. That's where Rayleigh is, like, helping teach him how to use this. Use his Haki, use, not just his observation and his armament, but how to control his Conqueror's Haki. And, like, this is implying that, like, Zoro has just been, like, oozing it, or, like, it kind of, like, has been leaking out through his control because he doesn't realize that he has it. Because, like, he didn't quite put that together when he fought against Kaido, that he was using Conqueror's Haki. Same thing with, I think he ended up probably using a bit of it when he fought against King to, like, finish King off. But again, he didn't realize that that's what that was. And so that's kind of what they're implying here. And Luffy's like, well, I've been sensing it off of you. I thought you realized what it was, type of a thing, is like what Luffy's saying. And Scopper is just like, how absurd. Haki is a power that must be understood and tamed. Your captain is one of the 4 emperors. You should be meticulous if you intend to have his back. So this is I love that this is Scopper scolding Zoro. Because, like, the thing is that, we know that Roger and Rayleigh both have Conqueror's Haki. Given what we just saw here with Scopper, he probably has it too. We just haven't really seen him fully utilize it beyond him cutting up Summers. But kind of that, I like that this implies that, like, at some point in time, as, like, each of them were, like, awakening their Conqueror's Haki, and then, of course, like, Odin had it too, so they would have been exposed to Odin with it as well, and, Whitebeard had it and stuff like that. But, Big Mom and Kaido all have it and stuff like that, and, so at various points in time, they would have ended up fighting against each other or alongside each other. But, like, it implies that, like, at some points in time, like, Scopper, Rayleigh, and Roger were just like, okay, we have this ability. Do we know what it is? Type of a thing. Like, who got it first? Was it Roger that activated it first? Or Rayleigh? Or something like that? And then, like, they all just eventually learned how to use it better. And, like, Shanks and Buggy would have grown up around this. Like, Shanks knows what Conqueror's Haki is, probably even as a kid. Same thing with Buggy. It's just that Buggy doesn't really put much stock into learning it himself, and Shanks probably did. Although I would like it if, like, we get, like, some flashback where we see Shanks and Buggy, like, learning the basics of at least observation and armament Haki. And then Buggy just kind of lets that go to the wayside once he's, after Roger dies, because it reminds him too much of Roger. That would be a good way of, like, tying that in. And then, like, maybe eventually we see him, like, actually utilize it. Like, he's like, fine, I'll use what the captain and what Rayleigh taught me and everything. So that would be, like, a nice thing there. But I like how Scopper is, like, scolding Zoro. And he's like, my bad. He's like, Sanji's, like, going up to Rayleigh again. Hey, old man, what about me? And then we just have Sanji just keeps getting interrupted here. I love it. It's how Sanji is just, like, ignored throughout this whole chapter. That is funny. And Loki is shouting at Hyrudine. Hyrudine, you're pathetic. You'd rather sit back and let those outsiders save our homeland. I'm right here. Use me. It's like, I am this weapon that you can utilize. I am this force that you can utilize to protect our country, to protect our home. And we're gonna get a list of more things in this chapter for, like, why Hyrudine is so hesitant in this regard in a moment. And Hyrudine is again yelling back at Loki, and it's just like, who's to say you won't side with the government? You could easily stab Elbath in the back again, just like you did on that day. How could you expect me to trust you? And, like, Loki's kind of like, oh yeah, okay, you got a good point there, because of course, Hyrudine has been under the impression for the last 14 years that Loki is the one who killed their father, that killed Harald. And even as readers, we're kind of like, that's maybe the case, maybe not the full truth, not half truth, part truth. We'll find out. We'll kind of possibly learn some more of that in the flashbacks. Some in this chapter. But it's like Loki has had this blame put upon him, and that just like stacks up against everything else that's been like blamed upon him since he was born. And Hyrudine, probably in all honesty, when Hyrudine first found out he was going to be a big brother, he may have been really, really happy about it. And then, once Loki is born, maybe Hyrudine actually got along with Loki's mother, and then he was maybe sad when she died. So there's that, but, he may have been, like, really happy that he was going to get to be a big brother. And then everything just starts to go downhill once Loki starts to be this much more violent or much more arrogant type of thing, is what we saw in, like, the snippets of flashbacks that we got, combined with Loki being treated one way because he is trueborn, as opposed to Hyrudine, who is a baseborn or a bastard, depending on how you want to set it up. So there's that. And it's like Loki really hasn't given Hyrudine any reason to trust him at all. Over the past whole chunk of their lifetime. Brenda went to the room. Hold on. Did you bring a rope upstairs? Did you bring me a rope? Did you bring me your rope? She brought me a rope. Rope? You want the rope? Rope. 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 Eat a rope. You're a baby. I gotta go back to recording. And yeah, Loki hasn't really given Hyrudine a reason to trust him. In a long time. I mean, like, maybe they got along a little while when, like, they were younger, but probably not that much. And then just, like, this rift between them has just, like, continued to grow over the years, unfortunately. So we have, Stanton is yelling at them because, like, they have, like, the lift ready to go up to the top. And he's like, Hyrudine, hurry up. We can't let the casualties pile up anymore. And Luffy just is like, okay, I guess this is a last-ditch effort. Hey, Loki! Jumps up on, like, Loki's knee. Join my crew! Which we all saw coming. The majority of the people who read these are just like, yeah, Luffy's gonna ask Loki to join the crew. That's just what's gonna happen. No surprise there. And that is exactly what happened. And Loki's like, what? Even Hyrudine's like, wait, what? No, don't ask him that, Straw Hat. And Luffy's reasoning for this is, if he does, then you can't complain if I free him, right, Hyrudine? Which, by a technicality, no, because, like, Hyrudine is Luffy's subordinate on top of Loki's brother and, all of this other stuff. And I like how, there's one of the rare moments where you get Zoro and Sanji agreeing with each other, and they're just like, no. It's like, Zoro's like, no, get real, Luffy. There's no way we'd fit him on the ship. And then Sanji is just like, hey, they have the food supplies. He eats even more than you do. And I like that content because, like, there's lots of fun, like, fan art of, like, if Loki had joined the Straw Hats. Like, him just, like, sitting on the ship, like, he's pouting in the corner. Or, like, they just, like, tie a giant raft to the back of the boat. Type of a thing. So there's, like, that joke there. There's also the joke that, like, well, Frankie can get huge in the Frankie Shogun. Luffy can get huge when he goes into Gear Fist. Chopper gets big when he goes into Monster Point. And then Robin gets big when she goes in her, Demonio Fleur. And it's just like, well, we already have kind of some giant versions of the crew members, although we don't usually end up having them all on the ship at the same time. Although Brooke is, I think, the only one of the crew that witnessed Fleur Demonio to any degree. Because the other ones haven't witnessed it yet. The others all saw Giant Luffy at Egghead, so that's not surprising. And they've all seen the Frankie Shogun, and they've all seen Chopper go Monster Point, so those aren't surprising to them. The Robin going Fleur Demonio, Brooke's the only one who's seen that. That we're aware of. Are you still trying to play with your rope? Be careful or your rope's gonna fall off the bed. I told you it'll fall off the bed. So yeah, Zoro and Sanji agree together, which is just funny. And then Luffy's like, Elbaf doesn't seem to want him, but he seems okay to me. Besides, if he tries anything, I can always beat him up. It's like Luffy's logic. And then Loki is just yelling at Luffy, "Don't mess with me, you runt. There's no way I'm becoming your underling." Luffy, yep, And Hyrudian is just like, "You're going off your gut, huh, Straw Hat?" And he's like, "I can't wait to see how he fights." And we have Stanton, Goldberg, and Roder yelling at him like, "Hyrudian, come on, we gotta get going. You know, the lift's ready. We gotta go." And he's like, "I'm coming now." And Hyrudian has like picked up Luffy and he's sitting on his hand and they're running toward the lift. And he's like, "Sorry, Straw Hat, Loki is a condemned criminal in Elbaf. I can't just hand him over to you." And Luffy's like, "Really?" And Gabon shouts out, "Hyrudian, release him." And they're all like, "What?" Like, Hyrudian is the one who has like the biggest reaction to this, but even Gerd just kind of looks over at like where, you know, Gabon is, but she's like right there. And then Goldberg kind of looks over, Rode looks over, and Stanton all look over because like they're over at the lift, but they heard this and they're all like looking over at like this, and they're not giving really major reactions. Gerd seems the most subdued. Goldberg is frowning. Rhodes is just kind of like not sure, and Stanton does look a bit worried. And Hyrudian's the one that has like the biggest reaction. He's like, What was that, Yasan? 14 years ago, Loki murdered 113 members of the castle guard. He left Elder Jarl at the brink of death, killed his own father in cold blood. He's the worst criminal our country's ever known." So I love how it was just like listing out the crimes, the legitimate crimes that they could actually blame on him. Although it's like stuff about him letting animals loose into the other villages to attack the citizens. That was something where I'm like, I don't know about that. It could have just been coincidence. Could have just been something he got framed for. Don't know. But this is stuff that they generally have more evidence on to like blame on Loki as opposed to, "Oh no, the horse died," or "there was a fire," type of thing. I also like how they're like, he's the worst criminal our country's ever known. This means that like everything Loki has done, Big Mom pales in comparison to that for when she was a child, for like flipping Jarl and killing him and like causing that rampage in the village, causing the fire in the village. What she did like pales in comparison to what Loki has done. And now, to be fair, the Giants are like, okay, well, she is a child at the time, and she wasn't fully in control of her own self when it happened and everything. But then it's like she grows into, you know, what she became as Big Mom. But like Loki did this as well. And to be fair, what Big Mom did happened after Loki was born, so it's kind of like this bad omen happened after the prince was born. And Gabon continues, and he was like, "I know, but on that day I felt a strange emanation of hockey coming from Quest Castle. Shanks and I went there to investigate. Looking back, it's possible we didn't have the whole story." And they're like, "You went to Quest Castle? What the, Luffy? Wait, did you just say Shanks?" And Hyrudian has like kind of settled on this, and he's like, "Stanton, I'm sorry, go ahead without me." And Luffy's like, "Zoro, Sanji, I'll catch up with you in a bit." So they're gonna go. Zoro and Sanji are running, and Zoro's like, "This dumb Shanks thing again." And Luffy, "Don't call Shanks dumb." And Zoro and Sanji actually defending Zoro, just like, "He means you're the dumb one." That's just funny. It's just like levity, very serious stuff going on. Levity, very serious stuff going on. Serious, levity. It's a One Piece heartbeat. And Scopper is actually kind of like pushing himself up so he can sit up better to talk. And Loki's actually kind of looking at Gabon like, "Yo, are you sure you want to do this?" And Gabon is just like, "Hyrudian, who else can get him to talk? You may have different mothers, but you're still brothers. You have, and Hyrudine is like looking at Loki and he's like, you have 3 minutes to explain. Tell me what happened in the castle 14 years ago. If you truly consider yourself a warrior of Elba, swear on our gods that what you say is the truth. And he's shouting about them, and Loki's like, that's cruel, brother. And we see Gerd is just watching as this is happening. Luffy is listening very intently. And we see, just different panels of what's going on. Hyrudine and Stanson and Goldberg and Road are on the lift, and they're getting Zoro and Sanji onto the lift to head up. And, like, Scopper and Chopper are listening. And the thing that I point out so much that has, like, changed about Luffy over the years is that way back in East Blue, when Nojiko is telling the guys about her and Nami's past, about why Nami is doing what she's doing with Arlong and everything. And, like, Luffy just wanders off. He does not listen. He's like, Nami's my friend, I don't care, and wanders off. Subsequently, Luffy has listened a lot more to the different backstories of different characters. When there is something that is being explained to him. Like, he sits and he listens to, like, the Odin flashback story when Kinemon is explaining it to them when they get to Wano. We see this here. Luffy is like very intently listening. Other things that we have seen that are like flashbacks that Luffy ends up getting explained to him, he is listening to. He's gotten better at that because he's learning that this is important to his friends to understand them. And maybe subsequently Nami has like sat him down and explained it to him, or Usopp or one of the others did. Did you drop your rope again? Mommy, I dropped my rope. Can you get my rope? I want my rope. Get it. Okay. So Loki's like, yeah, you really want me to relive that day. And he just kind of lays back and puts his hand over his arm over his eyes. Probably does a resigned sigh, and he's just like, I don't want to remember. It was an awful day. And we cut into the flashback, and it's cutting to 14 years ago. And we see Loki just, like, jumping out of the sky, like, probably jumped down from, like, some branch or whatever. And he's like, look up in the... And they're like, look up in the sky. And he crashes down right in front of Quest Castle. And he's laughing, and it's just like, it's Loki. And it's just like, Prince Loki has returned. Elder Jarl just arrived, too. So it's like, we see the castle, and it's not destroyed. This is, like, when it was in its heyday. It hasn't been shattered and smashed and everything. You have a rope. You have a rope. And we see Loki and Jarl actually talking to each other, like they're being civil. And he's just like, he summoned you too, Loki. Jarl saying, he's just like, something like that. This is my family's home, You seem well, old man. You haven't grown sick of life yet. It's just like, quiet, you. And we see how tall these guys are compared to, like, the regular giant guards at the castle. All of which have helmets that have horns on them. Might I add. All of their helmets, or they themselves, have horns. And this would have been after, after Harold had ripped off his own horns. Or whatever ends up happening with that. Whatever the full story is with that. We might get that. And it's just like, the king is in the audience chambers. They're heading toward, like, the throne room area. And Loki is just like, I wonder what he wants. It's hard to care about the whims of a government dog. And, like, we see them walking, like, Loki is taller than Jarl. So, for, like, that size comparison there, Loki's taller than Jarl. And he's like, he's sold out to the people who killed Rocks. If that's the direction Elbaf's heading, then I'll oppose it. Is what Loki is saying. And Jarl's like, you're being loud. If I'm too old for this stuff. Politics is a young man's game. Which is funny because, like, Jarl has technically been, like, the chief of Elbaf, essentially, for, like, the last 14 years since this incident happened. And Loki is like, we're in this mess because you keep spouting that kind of nonsense. Now we've got a whole generation of peace-addled brats who can't even hold a weapon. I kind of think this is like the way that a lot of people from like World War II looked at people that were growing up in the 60s and 70s, or were like the peace and love flower child generation. of like, they can't even defend themselves. What are they going to do? Why do they think peace is the answer? Because they grew up hearing stories about war from their parents. From their parents or their older siblings or their aunts and uncles or their grandparents or something like that. And they want a better world. And Jarl kind of says as such here, he's like, that's just a sign of the times. It's nice to know that my great-great-granddaughter won't see combat. They want peace. So, bear in mind, way back during Big Mom's flashback, Jarl and Jarl were not the biggest fans of King Harald and his opinions of, like, peace and trade and stuff like that with other nations. Whereas now, subsequently in that time frame, Jarl has become a great-great-grandfather, and he's watched his best friend die at the hands of a child in not battle, and he has seen a lot of other things happen over this time frame. He's seen, like, what Big Mom turned into and, like, all of this other stuff, and seen, interacted with lots of different, humans and giants and pirates and all this other stuff, and possibly rocks. And he's kind of not resigned, but he's like, I understand why this idea of a peaceful country, of a peaceful world, of a time when kids don't have to worry about, learning how to be a warrior because they have to, is different than, like, them, like, Colin wanting to become a warrior because he wants to, as opposed to, like, Ilva and the other kids who are like, we want to learn about a ton of this other stuff because it's interesting to us. We want to learn about science and history and art and culture and, a bunch of this other stuff. So there's, like, that difference there. And, I mean, let's put it this way. Given all the crap that's happening in the world right now, I would very much enjoy it if if peace was what we had. I grew up in a post 9/11 world. I remember when 9/11 happened. And I see all the stuff going on right now in the news with Israel and Iran and all this other stuff, and with Ukraine and Russia and all these other places. And I'm just like, I know it's a, kind of a, fool's errand, but I'm just like, world peace sounds like it would be a very nice thing to have. Now that depends on, like, how world peace ends up coming about, obviously, but still, there's that. What are you looking at? I love you, Brenda. You're a good girl. And so, like, so Jarl's like, yeah, it's just like they want peace. And this is after Saul's been on the island for a little while, and he's brought the books from O'Hara and everything. And Loki is like, coward. That's your duty to whip them into shape. And it's just like, they're like, what's that sound? It's coming from the throne room. So they hear, like, this noise, and as they're getting closer, they're like, thank you for coming, Elder Jarl. It's like what one of the guards said. And it's just like, Loki, young master, it's a pleasure to have you back. And it's just like, of course, is what Loki says. They're like, let me just consult with the king. He summoned me, and this is my home, is like what Loki is saying. It's just like, you can't bar me from going into the home in my home to greet my own father, type of a thing. And he, like, slams his foot into the guard and kicks him into the door, and he's just like, open up, idiot. And it's just like, young master, violences, and the door just crashes open, and he's just like, old man, I'm back. And we cut to double page spread, and we see a bunch of the guards, weapons at the ready, all horns on their head, although they don't appear like they are the dummy reversey size versions of the giants like we saw with Dorian Broggy. But we see them stabbing into Jarl. Or not into Jarl, into Harold. And he's in the middle of them, and he's just being stabbed. Now, we can very clearly see on one side one of his horns. He should not have horns at this point in time. And we can't tell because he's, like, very black silhouetted. We can tell it's supposed to be Harald. But we can't tell if he has, like, the dummy reversey wings. The horn he has is, like, a good sign of that, because we know that he ripped off his own horns out of, his, despisal of his hatred of like this ancient giant blood that he carried. So we have that, and we just see these horrified looks on Jarl and Loki's face, and it's just like, Harold! And Loki is like, what the hell are you doing? Because again, it's like what they walk in on, it's these guards attacking their own king and stabbing him. We cut away from the castle, and we cut over to where Gabon's house is, where his and Ripley's house is, in the realm of the sun, which is not that far from the castle, because we can see the castle on its branch in the distance. And we're going to have Shanks and Gabon. So it's 14 years ago. This is before Shanks met Luffy. And doing the math, he would technically already have Uta as his adopted daughter at this point in time. If him finding her as a baby, as like a 1-year-old in the treasure chest is true, is what they're going with for canon purposes. He would already have Uta as his daughter at this point in time. Let's see, Luffy was 19. Uta is, I think, like a year older than him. So Uta would be like about 6 at this point in time. We don't see any of the other members of the red-haired pirates. So it's quite possible that, like, they're in, like, the village or something. This might be our best shot, depending on how the rest of this flashback plays out. Once we cut back to it, this might be our best shot of seeing Uta in the manga, as more than just like a slight silhouette in a panel. This might be our best shot at that, if that happens. I want that to happen. I want them to show Uta, but still. Shanks and Gabon are talking. They're sitting in essentially what is like a hot spring. It's probably like just like a giant cup filled with hot water, essentially. Hi, I love you. You're a good girl. I'm almost done. Talk faster. Get through this faster, Mommy. I want my pets. You are fine. So it's just like, this is the best. Right? They're just like sitting in the hot spring, which sounds so nice. And it's just like, it's been quite a while since we've shared a bath. How long has it been? 3, maybe 4 years is what Gabon's saying to Shanks. And like, this is referencing a couple of things, because like on the Oro Jackson, one of the things that we see at one point in time during the Odin flashback is we see them like having this big group bath at like this big hot spring. It's like all of the crew together. So that's just kind of fun there. So that's like a reference to that. And Shanks is just like, get real. It's been 10 years since the captain died. So this is 14 years ago. Roger died 10 years prior, so 24 years ago. And Scopper is just like, that long, huh? That must have felt like forever ago to you. Yeah. I mean, Shanks essentially, he was there. We know him and Buggy were there when it happened. We don't know if Scopper or Rayleigh were there when it happened. Actually, I'm pretty sure it's confirmed Rayleigh wasn't. He was probably at Sabaody at that point in time, when Roger was executed. Can I help you? And Shanks is like, yeah, life's completely changed. I honestly just wanted to be a carefree pirate with Buggy. Still, Elbath, there are some things I'd like to know. So, what we're seeing here is, like, as we're seeing this, we see Shanks' arm, his left arm, specifically his left arm, propped up outside of the hot tub. Hot spring setup thing that they're in. And we see a symbol on his arm that kind of looks like a circle with like like a cross in it with like little hearts along the outside at the tips of like the lines at the end of the lines. And I'm like, Mark of the Abyss is probably what we're thinking, is what the majority of people are thinking. And this is specifically on his left arm, around his elbow area. And Scopper is just like, understandable. You were a child of destiny, but let's not dwell on the tricky topics today, Shanks. And Scopper isn't like he doesn't look as gray as he is currently. He his hair's kind of going gray. He's got the mustache going on, and he's got like the braided beard going on. And he's just like, remember little garden, the island where we met Dory and Broggy, and he's like, of course. So this is just confirming that, like, Shanks, Gabon, probably the rest of the Roger Pirates, met Dory and Broggy on Little Garden at some point during their journey. So this is just confirming this is just like, yeah, that's why Shanks knows, Dory and Broggy when they when they show up at Elbath, when he shows up at Elbath a little while ago, why he was just like, it was so great catching up with old friends type of a thing. So that just, like, confirms that. And then we just have, like, Ripley pop her head in the window. And she's like, hot enough, ya, son, Shank-kun. And Shanks is just like, you scared me, Shinku. And Scopper just finds this hilarious. He's just like, it's great, thanks. It's just like, I love that they have, like, this nice little hot spring here. It's just like a hot bath. And we cut inside, and we see like a shield in the background on the wall, or part of a shield, what I assume is a shield. We see her holding Colin. Colin would be about 6 years old chronologically at this point in time. Divide that by the way the giant's age. He would be about 2, give or take, 2-ish years old physically, for, like, growth rate. She's like, this spot really is the best. And Shanks is like, so this is what a human giant household is like. And she's like, have some lingonberry tart and help yourself to drink. So she's just, like, holding up a pie. And I like how it looks like Ripley is essentially wearing, like, a hoodie and sweatpants. I love that. Like, there's like a bottle of wine and, like, a glass of wine. I like how that's set up. It's like, I like how she's just, like, sitting there, like, in sweatpants and a hoodie. I love that there are, like, giant hoodies for the Giants to wear. I love that because, like, we haven't seen the Giants wear anything else besides, like, their armor, really. Besides their battle armor and everything. And I like how she's just, like, lounging around her house in her sweats. I love that. That's very relatable, Ripley. I agree. And she's like, Shank-kun, got any juicy old stories about Yasan? And Shanks is, like, starting to eat the lingonberry pie or the lingonberry tart, and he's like, about Gabon-san? Oh, I've got one. Anytime we made it to port, there were who knows how many, ouch! And, like, Scopper is just like, stop that, like, the whole pulling on his cheek to make him stop. You brat, if you want to make it out of this country alive, you'll zip it. I'm assuming that was supposed to be, you won't know how many women were waiting at the ports for old Yasan when we showed up. And Scopper and him keep talking, and he's like, Harold, he's the king of Elbath. The people think of him like a god. And Shanks is just like, yeah, I met him at Marijois. We got along all right. Red flag there. With him being at Marijois. This confirms that Shanks had gone to Marijois. This is already more implied by, like, Shamrock. When he's talking about, like, yeah, I met Shanks once type of a thing. Or I met my brother and, like, we didn't get along, or that type of a thing is kind of like what we're seeing there. Back when he was talking to Loki. Shanks went to Marijois, and he ran into Harold at some point when he was there. And he's just like, we couldn't speak freely in the Holy Land. Now that we're both in this country, I really want to talk to him before it's too late. And we cut back to the castle, and it's like, that day, the massacre at the castle took place. Elbath's most beloved king, Harold the Benevolent, lost his life, and we just see, like, this the black hockey radiating off of the castle. And, like, Shanks and Gabon feel this for how far away it is, and they feel this. And they're, like, we see, like, the guards are shouting and pleading, let us out, you who closed the gate, for, like, help, and, like, they're being slaughtered. Kind of reminiscent of in Dressrosa in the flashback when Doflamingo forces forces Riku and his men to slaughter the citizens with his, parasite thread. We see the silhouette of what is Jarl with getting the sword stabbed into his head. Elder Jarl! And we see, like, this lock being broken on this chest that would presumably have the, whatever the devil fruit is, whether it is actually the Gamu no Mi or some other devil fruit. It's like, this is the forbidden devil fruit passed down within Elbath. And this, silhouette shadow is taking it. It's just like, but just how did this man come to be so highly regarded by his people? And now we're getting the second flashback of the chapter at the end of this flashback. And it cuts to a long time ago, 109 years before the present day. If you asked anyone what the scariest thing on the sea is, the answer would always be the same: the giant warrior pirates. And we see the great Eric. This would have been in the heyday of like Dorian Broggy on the crew. They are not the captains, I'm assuming. Given what we're going to see, they were not the captains. And it's just like, that was how things were in that era. In that age, even ships from the land of the giants evoked immense fear due to Elbaf's reputation, and they're landing on this innocent little island that probably didn't do anything to them. Possibly didn't. Don't know. And the giants are just starting to like rampage on the island, and we're going to see young Harald, and he's like, I heard there's a beautiful princess in your castle. Let's have a peek. And it's just like, he was one of the reasons for said reputation. And he's like, he smashes one of his own men into the castle where like the king and the princess are hiding in terror. And it's just like, whoops, my foot slipped. And one of the soldiers is like, the other giants is just like, Your Majesty, please stop it. And it's like, King Harald of Warland, Elbaf. And he's just like laughing, and we see him like very young, very fit. Has like horns exactly like Loki. He looks very similar to Loki, except he has like the short black hair and a sword. That's the sword that we kept seeing him in like the portrait and everything. And I think it's the same one that stabbed in the Jarl's head. And it's Harald began his reign at 45 years of age, just 15 in human terms. Despite this, King Harald, remarkably enough, was pure scum. And we see him just terrorizing the citizens. We see the king and the princess of this kingdom just terrified. And we get a close-up of Harald, and he's got like the Viking like face paint tattoo type thing on him. And it's just like, go on, tell me who your god is. And so it's like, the way that we are seeing him here is again, it's juxtaposing like the way that he used to act with the way that we've seen Loki act, with the way that we hear how the current citizens of Elbaf view Jarl and viewed him for a good chunk of time. So presumably what we're going to see in this flashback is something where we're going to get more information about like what happened with Jarl or what happened with Harold. And like we see like the flashback, we see like young Dorian Broggy and Raimo and Kashi, and like this is even a few years before they would end having their battle on, start their century long clash on Little Garden. This is before even that happened. I was looking up some things to reference for time frames here for this chapter. So we don't have anything that happens exactly 109 years ago, but a couple of the things that I found that kind of happen similarly in time. So 116 years ago is when the people of Flevence discovered the amber lead that the world government realizes is poisonous, and they still allow them to, get it because it makes profit. 113 years ago was when Mother Carmel starts her job as a child slaver under this name Mountain Witch. Bear in mind that is before she ends up on Elbaf. That's before that. And then we have 107 years ago is when Clover is born. And then 105 years ago is when Kurozumi Higurashi was born. So just to give you some context as to like what's going on in the world at this point in time. Or some of the other just events, characters, births, stuff like that we know of that happened sometime around that time frame. Obviously, this would be approaching to when Dorian Broggy end up having their duel on Little Garden, but not quite at the same time. But so that's kind of what we're getting here for like time frame for that. That's what I have here. Thank you for watching. I'm actually recording this Thursday night. It'll go up Friday morning because my mom and I were in the middle of watching Blue Skies, which is a Bing Crosby and Fred Astaire movie. It's if you want an interesting fact, that's the one where they do Putting on the Ritz, where Fred Astaire sings and dances to Putting on the Ritz. And I believe that's the one where it ends up with like all the different mirrored versions of him. We were literally in the middle of that scene, and my mom was getting a bunch of phone calls, so I'm like, I'm just going to go upstairs and record. So got this recorded now. I will edit it in the morning, and then I will post it Friday. So I thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye!